Hey everybody, welcome. Today I wanted to share a great after reading strategy that uses metaphors and similes to really deepen student comprehension. I know we always want our students to have stronger, better, deeper comprehension, but a lot of times we tend to ask those right there questions, those knowledge level questions, as opposed to comprehension. Now, we know there's nothing wrong with asking some knowledge level questions. We need to know that the students understand things at that surface level first, but we always want to take it those next few steps and give them those deeper level critical thinking comprehension type questions. And notice too that on our state standardized test, any standardized test, they are most often asked comprehension questions, very few knowledge level or recall level questions. And one thing that I've definitely noticed through data across the country is that those multi-step thinking questions are the ones that students struggle with the most. Our higher level, our mid-level, and our struggling guys, they all struggle with multi-step thinking questions. By that I mean it's a question where they have to maybe look back and then think about something and then take it to one more level. So it's almost like a three-step process. They normally do okay with a one-step process or a two-step process. Our strugglers start to fall apart on a two-step process, but almost all of our kids struggle with that three-step process. So this really helps them think along those lines, to train their brain, so to speak, to think further down the line than just what's presented in front of me. So these are called figurative questions. It's really not what they don't really have a name, but it is a great, really fun activity, but it does require you to come up with some metaphors or similes at first. Now, it will eventually be handed to them. It can get kids moving in the classroom, so you may have them getting up and moving if that works for you in your classroom with the number of kids you have, your classroom setup. And of course, if you have restrictions like COVID restrictions right now, it absolutely gets kids talking, and kids love to talk. Keep in mind, guys, that you know, all the research shows, so to speak, that we remember about 70% of what we discuss as opposed to about 10% of what we read. So allowing the kids to discuss and form a deeper understanding not only helps them solidify it in their brains, but it also helps our kids with misconceptions, or our kids that struggle to learn from each other. We know that our strugglers tend to tune us out pretty quickly, but when they're in a small group with other students and they listen to them, they're picking up on a lot. It absolutely requires them to have a much deeper understanding of what they just read, and it's a great way to tackle misconceptions. So if they misread something or didn't necessarily pay attention to what they read, or they were confused about something, this is a time to get it taken care of. A lot of times, again, our strugglers will not ask us questions when they're confused. But if they're in small groups, they will. They tend to feel a little more at ease there. It absolutely will require them to provide evidence if you want it to, and I think that's a wonderful thing to always have them do. And you may or may not want to do things like put them in envelopes. I say envelopes because for some reason you can put a boring worksheet in an envelope and the kids tear into it. There's something about envelopes. So when should I use this strategy? You could use it in the mid-read of a longer text. So if you're doing a novel, you can stop it every so often and use this. If you are reading something that's a longer text, like a really long essay, you might want to use this mid or stop periodically through it. Most other texts, especially texts that they're going to get exposed to, say, on their state standardized tests, have them read it all the way through. This is a great after read. And it's especially good for content area reading. It really helps them kind of put things in their brain in a different way. So I love this for content area reading as well. So what do we need? Well, the teacher will need to have pre-formed questions using the topic at hand. So you want to know your topic, and you're going to create basically two similes that make sense. Now, you may be using more than one. You will need more than one topic and then two similes per topic, most likely. The first time you do this and you're practicing it with your kids, you may just want to use one just to give them an idea, especially if you're modeling. You're going to need preformed small groups, and I always say that's up to teachers how you want to preform those small groups. I do say if you have extremely high flyers, those kids that are like, you know, through the roof high flyers, and you have more than one of them in a room, you may want to pair them up or put them in a small group. Otherwise, you know, it's up to you. Disperse them the way you would, or if you want to keep a group of strugglers together so you can help them. But generally, I find it's better just to kind of mix everybody. Possibly envelopes if you want to use them. You absolutely don't have to. Possibly graphic organizers to help them write down their answers and add their evidence. First couple times you do it, I would absolutely give them some sort of graphic organizer or worksheet that allows them to see exactly how you want this done. Possibly other articles or information. So they may need other articles or information. I'll explain that in a bit. But this is a great way to get them to jump onto research or reading something else. If you have things that you want them to read, maybe 3 or 4 different things to help them understand something, this is a great way to do it. The students will simply need something with which to write the reading material. They will probably want to have that in their hands or on their computer or whatever, and something on which to write. So paper, either what you gave them or their own paper. I know you probably know what metaphors and similes are. However, if you're a content area teacher and looking at it, you can and looking at this, then you can take a peek at that. So figurative questions. This is how you would create your question. Okay, is blank, that's your topic, is blank more like blank or like blank? So is the topic more like one thing symbolic or like another thing that is symbolic? So Katniss Everdeen, I tend to use the Hunger Games because I feel like most people have seen or heard of the Hunger Games, and they've either seen it or read it or at least heard of it. So Katniss Everdeen, is she more like a tornado or a flood? So notice these are awesome. We're using the word like, which makes it a simile, but they're metaphoric, right? So is she more like a tornado or a flood? There's no right answer there, right? Absolutely no right answer. But the kids can really back it up. I don't know what I go with because both of those are kind of destructive. So the destruction part is going, but a tornado, is it because she, you know, tears everything up in her path and drops it back down a different way? Or is it like a flood where it's just so much coming at once and things moving quickly? I don't know. The kids will come up with way better answers than we ever could. But think about the heft that goes into this. If they're using Katniss, they're at the end of this. This could be actually a really great essay at the end of a novel. Is she more like a tornado or a flood? And if they have to pick one in their small group, then they have to go back and find evidence for that. You set up, if you're going to give them some sort of a worksheet or graphic organizer, giving them, you know, this, and then our choice, why we made that choice, and then the evidence to back it up. So have that for them in worksheet form the first couple times until they learn to do this on their own, okay? On informational text, here's a great example. The circulatory and respiratory systems work together more like police and EMTs, or like the judicial and legislative branches of government. They may need extra information on that, right? So you may say, I'm going to provide them with an article on what police, how police and emergency responders work together, and I'm going to provide them with an article on how the judicial and legislative branches work together. Now, how cool would that be? Because I promise you, if you tell them, here, read about the circulatory and respiratory systems, now read about police and EMTs, now read about the judicial and legislative branches, they're not going to read all 3 of those at once, right? If you say, let's read about circulatory and respiratory systems, they read that in their pairs or their small groups, whatever works for you. Again, if you have strugglers, chances are it's better to at least pair them up or put them in a small group so that reading actually gets done. But then you could say, well, you're going to have to choose between, are they like police? Is it like, are these 2 systems like police and EMTs, or the judicial and legislative branches? And if you're on some sort of electronic device for the kids, you could just provide them links, right? If you are on, if you need to hand it out, have some articles ready to hand out. You don't need a million of them, you just need a couple per group. If you want to model this, and I highly, 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 highly stress that we always should model. An easy way to model is to say something like, is a tomato is more like an orange, or is it more like a cucumber. And then tell the kids, you are welcome to go on the internet and Google information about tomatoes, information about oranges, information about cucumbers, or have them read first all about a tomato. Why would I stress having them do this? I will tell you, find a super boring thing about a tomato. Share that you're going to ask them this question later. They can start annotating while they're reading the boring thing about the tomato. And then they're really going to jump into the next two boring pieces about cucumbers or oranges, right? You can have it ready for them, or again, you can say, I want you to go research, and watch them use their research skills in a way that they probably wouldn't if you just gave them a boring research thing to do. So it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Using that tomato, orange, and cucumber is a great way to model it. It's easy. It hits multiple things, right? And they're thinking really deeply about what they're reading. So require evidence. You don't have to require evidence, but I like to have my kids require evidence and have them write it down. They're not going to remember it in their heads. It's up to you how you expect to see that. If it's high school, you may want to be, MLA or APA, make sure they're getting their citations in there. If it's middle school, or you're not wanting to get to that degree of MLA and APA and all that good stuff, just have them write down paragraphs or pages and paragraphs, and write down the actual evidence. There's all kinds of great ways you can do this, guys, with evidence. You can give them something really big and long where they can write it on note cards and stick it on there, just make it really fun and interactive, or just simply on a graphic organizer. So I wanted to let you understand what it was first before I talk about the steps of how to do it. It's very easy. Have your questions ready to go, possibly in envelopes, possibly not. Place them around the room strategically, where you want the students to move. And that's up to you. Again, if you don't have a situation where your kids can move, you can simply give them the envelopes. You can have more than one topic or just one topic. If it's just one topic, they're going to stay seated, or you could say just go to spots in the room just to get them up. But having more than one thing for them to discuss, or more than one topic with their similes or metaphors, is a great way to do this. So make sure students have read the material. Again, up to you, small groups, pairs. Absolutely, if you have strugglers, again, I can't stress enough, have someone maybe pair read with them, or a small group read round robin, and to help those strugglers through. You decide how much should be read. So if it's a longer text, you may just want to bump it into a little bit and then give them just one of these. So they're not getting up and moving about the room. You give them just one of these. You just read this much about whatever your topic is. Give them one of these and let them discuss it, and then move on to the next section. So you may want to chunk something bigger into maybe 2 or 3 pieces. Know the number of preformed groups to determine the number and placement of questions. So if you're going to use 2 or 3 of these questions, think about the number of kids that you have and how you want them moving throughout the room. I strongly suggest that you don't make your groups any bigger than 4. Once you get a group of 5, they get a little goofy. A group of 3, I would go with 3 or 4 before I would go with 4 or 5. So a group of 3 or a group of 4 as opposed to anything bigger. If you only do pairs, the discussion's not really as good. Explain to the class if the kids are moving, how they're moving about the class, how they're moving throughout the classroom, and have them move from question to question and making their choices. Creating their answers and their evidence with their rationale. Their rationale is their reasoning, and then their evidence is what backs that up. And then have them share with the class. I love to do a gallery crawl, where I'll give the kids maybe 3 sticky notes. And as they're gallery crawling around, I always tell them it's a silent gallery crawl. They can write things on the sticky notes to each of the groups as they go around. So if they see some great evidence, oh my gosh, this is great evidence, we're going to use that, stick that down. Or this is a little confusing right here, the directions said to blah, 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 put that down. Or I'm confused about this evidence, how does it work with this rationale, put that down, that kind of thing. But while they're doing that and they're going around and looking at what other groups have written down, they are also gathering ideas for themselves, so they can go back to their group, their gallery, after the gallery crawl, and say, hey, maybe we should add this, or maybe we should take out that. I love doing that. It gives them just one extra chance before, the big grade or whatever. After doing that a few times, let the students know it's their turn now. So this is kind of just a spin-off of that. They'll need to be in small groups or in pairs for this. This actually can work okay with pairs. They'll need something with which to write and something on which to write, easy peasy. You give them the topic. You tell them to pick a symbol to represent that topic. They need to explain the symbol, it's a metaphor basically, and how they're connected. And I'm sorry, I know my picture is over this, so I'll read this to you. So again, we'll go with Katniss Everdeen. What symbol represents her? Steel, okay? Explanation of the symbol. So I went to Google this. You may want your students to go Google things, right? Steel is iron with only a few additional pieces, well, I don't know, elements that make it much stronger than other types of iron. And entire modern civilizations have been built on steel, right? Steel is a huge construction piece in all over our country and other countries. So why did I connect these two together? Why did I put Katniss Everdeen and steel together? While Katniss is like everyone else from her district, she has a few additions to her personality, like extra knowledge about hunting and all that good stuff, courage, passion, that make her stronger than the other people from her district. And she is the one on which this new civilization, after the bad ones, the dystopian one is torn away, she's going to be kind of what everything is built on. She's the backbone. People often say steel is the backbone of America. So Katniss is like the backbone of the new civilization that will come. So you get the idea. So all you're giving students is this, the topic, and then this grid, so to speak. What is the symbol? What's the explanation? How are they connected to each other? Okay. And again, you want to make sure you model that for them. But that's even easier. You may want to use that instead of the other one because that's less work on you. Keep in mind, though, that one where you make them choose between two things, that's really going to help them think in multi-step ways and force them to go out and read other articles or other information. You can provide multiple topics after reading. For instance, the topic on the characters or the event that happened, or any additional information in there. So you may want to, let's say we're talking about Katniss. You may give Katniss and Prim and Katniss's mom or Gale. You may want to talk about events in history. There may have been 3 things that led up to this war, or the 3 people or the 3 leaders that were, the part of the axis of evil or whatever. Any informational topic you can think of, you can use this as a great after reading strategy. You can do this in groups or pairs. I would strongly suggest groups at first for certain, pairs later. You can let kids vote for the best ones so everybody gets to hear them. And again, you can have students move around the room or they can stay right in their groups depending on your needs and wants at that time. Please always remember to model the process and the procedure, right? So exactly what you want to see them produce for you, you need to model that for them. So show them exactly what you want. And in modeling, it doesn't just have to be, I'm going to do the entire thing and show it to you. You can create it while they're watching you. So if you're doing the tomato, is it more like an orange or a cucumber? You can let them think along with you, and that is modeling. Allow them to share whenever possible, those silent gallery crawls, or just let's, groups switch real quickly and see what the other group wrote down. That way they're getting an idea. That's a great way to catch misconceptions, but also to add additional thinking. Think about all the procedures you're going to need to get this rolling, map it out in your head and map it out for the students so that classroom management doesn't become a problem. If classroom management becomes a problem while you're doing this, think about where you can put in a procedure to make any negative behavior stop. Gradually, you'll need less and less of the scaffolding and the hand-holding and the explaining because they will catch on to this. If you do this every so often in your classroom, the kids will really catch on to it. You won't even need to hand them a piece of paper eventually. All right, guys, I hope that you try this in your classroom after reading. And if you do, please let me know how it goes. That is my personal email. You can also use the work email. But let me know how it goes. Feel free to take pictures or record or anything like that. I'd love to see it. If you have any questions or comment, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Thanks.